I am horrified. I have been out here since 2018, and I have never lived where there has been a triple homicide ever.
Try to imagine coming home one morning and finding your entire family dead. That's exactly what happened in Bryant, Arkansas, on a quiet morning in June 2025. The whole neighborhood was in disbelief. No one could understand how something so brutal could happen in such a peaceful place. But what made this case even more shocking was who police said was behind it. Because trust me, this is one of those stories that will leave you outraged, questioning how someone so close could be capable of something so evil.
My wife and I are here with our daughter, and she played with those kids, like they would draw chalk on the sidewalk and ride their scooters together, and now they're just, we don't even know what happened.
Just 12 hours before this interview, this corner of Saline County, Arkansas, looked like any other American neighborhood preparing for Father's Day weekend. The Jennings family home sat nestled in the Benjamin Grove subdivision, a stone's throw from the local middle school where kids rode bikes and neighbors waved from driveways. Monica Jennings, 55 years old, had probably spent that Saturday the way she spent most weekends, surrounded by family. Her husband Michael, 63, the man everyone called a devoted stepfather. Their daughter Kayla Mitchell, 32, who'd brought her 3 young children over to Grandma and Grandpa's house. Nobody talks about the last normal moments before everything changes. The last cup of coffee Michael poured, the last time Monica hugged her grandchildren, the last time Kayla tucked her kids into bed in the spare room, probably promising them pancakes in the morning. But here's what haunts investigators. Somewhere in those final hours, Jared Mitchell made a decision. The 34-year-old son, brother, and uncle drove through these familiar streets with a plan that would destroy his entire family. What pushes someone to cross that unthinkable line? What final thread snaps in a mind already fraying at the edges? The answer might lie in a detail buried in court records from 2017, an involuntary commitment that hints at demons we're only beginning to understand. But on this particular Sunday morning, those demons would manifest in the most horrific way imaginable. 7:30 a.m., June 22nd. A family member returns to the house on Lena Drive, maybe coming back from an early shift, maybe just stopping by for Sunday breakfast. The front door opens to silence, not the peaceful quiet of a sleeping household, the wrong kind of silence, the kind that makes your stomach drop before your brain even processes why. Please, someone help us. The 911 call would capture the raw agony of discovery. 3 bodies, gunshot wounds. And somewhere in that house of horrors, 3 children, alive, physically unharmed, but witnesses to something that would haunt them forever. The Bryant Police Department descended on Lena Drive within minutes. Sergeant Todd Croson would later describe a scene that even seasoned officers struggled to process. Monica Jennings, the matriarch who'd held this family together for decades, gone. Michael Jennings, the steady presence who'd raised Kayla as his own, gone. And Kayla Mitchell, a young mother whose children were just rooms away, gone. Thankfully, the children were found huddled together, alive, but forever changed. How do you explain to a child why their mother won't wake up? Why Grandma and Grandpa aren't moving? These officers, trained for the worst humanity can offer, found themselves becoming impromptu grief counselors, protectors of innocence already shattered. The crime scene told a confusing story. Some investigators saw no signs of forced entry, suggesting the killer was someone the family knew, someone they'd let walk through their front door. Others noticed evidence of a break-in, painting a picture of violent intrusion. Which version was true, and why did it matter so much to understanding what happened in those final moments? As detectives processed the scene, a disturbing pattern emerged. This wasn't random violence. The killer knew exactly who was in that house. They knew where to find each family member. They knew 3 children were present and made a choice to spare them. That's not chaos, that's calculation. 8 hours. That's all it took for investigators to track down their suspect. 8 hours from the moment those bodies were discovered to the moment Jared Mitchell sat in his truck on Amber Lane, just streets away from the carnage. He hadn't fled the state, hadn't destroyed evidence, hadn't even left the neighborhood. It was as if he was waiting. The arrest was swift, almost anticlimactic for a crime so devastating. No dramatic standoff, no desperate chase through suburban streets. Just a man in a truck, surrounded by officers, surrendering to a fate he seemed to have accepted hours earlier. The same hands that had pulled a trigger 3 times that morning now raised in surrender as officers approached with weapons drawn. But arrests don't answer the questions that tear communities apart. Why would a son execute his own mother? Why would a brother murder his sister while her children slept nearby? What darkness lived inside Jared Mitchell that Sunday morning couldn't be contained any longer? The Benjamin Grove subdivision would never feel the same. Neighbors who'd waved at the Jennings family for years now found themselves locking doors they'd once left open. Parents held their children tighter. And in the midst of it all, a GoFundMe page appeared. The community's desperate attempt to do something, anything, in the face of incomprehensible loss.
And we begin tonight with breaking news. Bryant police have made an arrest in a triple homicide. Police say the man responsible killed both his sister and his parents inside an Alexander home.
$2 million. That's the bond set for Jared Mitchell as he sat in the Saline County Detention Center. But no amount of money could bring back what was lost that morning. 3 generations of a family erased in minutes. 3 children orphaned and traumatized. A community left asking how they missed the warning signs, if there even were any to miss. The question nobody wanted to voice, but everyone was thinking, how well do we really know our own families? 3:30 p.m., June 22nd. While families across Saline County prepared Sunday dinners, Jared Mitchell sat in his truck on Amber Lane, engine still running. The man who just destroyed his entire family hadn't even bothered to leave town. That detail would haunt investigators for months. Was it arrogance, shock, or had he simply given up? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're watching from today. And if this case hits you, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what's next. The arrest itself raised more questions than it answered. Local tips had flooded the Bryant Police Department within hours of the discovery. But here's what doesn't add up. Multiple neighbors reported seeing Mitchell's truck circling the neighborhood that morning, yet nobody thought to call police until after the bodies were found. How many times do we see something off but convince ourselves it's nothing? How many tragedies could be prevented if we trusted our instincts? Detective work isn't like the movies. It's doorbell cameras and cell phone records, witness statements that contradict each other, and piecing together a timeline from digital breadcrumbs. The Bryant Criminal Investigation Division worked methodically through the evidence, but one crucial piece remained frustratingly elusive: motive. No indication of a random act, Sergeant Croson would tell reporters, his words careful, measured. But if it wasn't random, what was it? Rage, revenge, mental breakdown? The investigators knew about Mitchell's 2017 involuntary commitment, those lost days when his family had watched him struggle with demons they couldn't name. Had those same demons returned 7 years later with deadly consequences? The forensic evidence painted a brutal picture. 3 separate crime scenes within one house. 3 family members who never had a chance to defend themselves or escape. The medical examiner would note the precision of the shots. This wasn't spray-and-pray violence. This was methodical execution. But the weapon itself? That detail remains locked in evidence files, another piece of the puzzle authorities won't release. Here's what we do know. Those 3 children, the ones found alive in that house of death, they heard everything. Every shot, every scream, every moment of their world ending. Child psychologists would later work with them, trying to help process trauma that no therapy manual could adequately address. How do you help a child understand why Uncle Jared, The same man who probably attended their birthday parties and holiday dinners became a monster. Inside the Saline County Detention Center, Jared Mitchell awaited his first court appearance. $2 million. That's what the court decided his freedom was worth. But bond amounts don't capture the real cost. 3 lives ended. 3 children orphaned. Extended family members shattered. A community forever scarred. The legal machine churned forward with mechanical precision. 3 counts of first-degree murder filed within hours. The prosecutor's office moved fast, perhaps sensing the community's need for swift justice. But justice and answers aren't the same thing, and while the charges were clear, the why remained maddeningly absent. June 23rd, Mitchell faced the judge for the first time. The man in the orange jumpsuit bore little resemblance to family photos that would later surface. Gone was any trace of the brother, the son, the uncle. What remained was hollow-eyed silence. No plea entered, no statement given. Just a man who'd crossed an unforgivable line, sitting in chains while a judge read charges that carried the weight of 3 lifetimes. The defense attorney, whose name still hasn't been released, faced an impossible task. How do you defend the indefensible when 3 bodies and 3 traumatized witnesses tell a story written in blood? What possible narrative can counter that evidence? The August 5th preliminary hearing loomed, but everyone knew this case wouldn't hinge on whether Mitchell did it. But why? Outside the courthouse, the community struggled to process their grief. A GoFundMe for funeral expenses exploded past its initial goal within days. Strangers who'd never met the Jennings family contributed, perhaps recognizing that this could have been any family, any neighborhood, any Sunday morning. The Benjamin Grove subdivision organized vigils, their candlelight flickering against the Arkansas summer heat, prayers mixing with tears. But anger simmered beneath the sorrow. How had nobody seen this coming? The 2017 commitment, was that a warning sign ignored? The drug convictions in Mitchell's past, should someone have intervened sooner? These questions tormented those who knew the family, each person searching their memories for clues they might have missed. National media descended on Bryant within 48 hours. People magazine, Law and Crime, outlets that usually cover big city tragedies, suddenly focused their cameras on this quiet Arkansas community. But conflicting reports muddied the waters. Some said no forced entry. Others insisted there were signs of break-in. Some claimed Mitchell confessed. Others reported total silence. In the absence of official information, speculation filled the void. The investigation continues even now, months later. Forensic evidence still being processed. Witness statements still being verified, phone records, financial documents, medical histories, all picked apart for answers that might never satisfy those who loved Monica, Michael, and Kayla. Those 3 children, their names withheld to protect what privacy they have left. They're the living victims of this tragedy. Somewhere tonight, they're trying to sleep in beds that aren't at Grandma's house. They're asking questions their guardians can't answer. They're growing up with a story they'll have to tell therapists, partners, maybe their own children someday. This is what familicide really costs. Not just the lives taken, but the lives destroyed. The children who survive carry invisible wounds that never fully heal. They'll spend decades wondering if they could have done something, said something, noticed something. Survivor's guilt in its cruelest form, when the survivors are too young to understand why they feel guilty at all. The truth about Jared Mitchell might never fully emerge. Mental illness, family secrets, a rage that built for years until it exploded on one terrible morning. We search for reasons because random evil is too terrifying to accept. We need monsters to make sense, to follow patterns we can recognize and prevent. But here's the hardest truth. Sometimes families harbor darkness we never see coming. Sometimes the danger isn't a stranger at the door. It's someone with a key. Sometimes the person who destroys a family is family itself. Monica Jennings lived 55 years. Michael Jennings, 63 years. Kayla Mitchell, just 32 years with her whole life ahead. They deserved more mornings, more Sunday breakfasts, more time with those 3 children who now face a lifetime without them. What warning signs do we ignore in our own families because it's easier than acknowledging uncomfortable truths? And how many more Sunday mornings will end in tragedy before we start paying attention? Now, Arkansas is generally considered a safe place, but like anywhere else, it's had its share of shocking crimes over the years. In fact, just recently, another chilling case happened in the same state, and in the next video, you'll see exactly what I mean.
We were able to take a monster off the streets and bring relief to Clinton and Kristen's precious girls.
The monster he's talking about is a schoolteacher turned killer. On July 26, 2025, inside Devil's Den State Park in Arkansas, a teacher with no criminal record hunted down a family he had never even met. But why?
Washington County received a call from the visitor center. 2 children are there. They advised that their parents were assaulted. One was possibly stabbed. The parents are missing.
Before we dive in, please consider dropping a like and subscribing. It helps spread these stories so more people can hear them. Just hours before their worlds shattered, the Brinks were living the kind of life that makes you believe in the American dream. Clinton, 43, and Kristen, 41, had recently moved their family to Prairie Grove, Arkansas, chasing a quieter life for their 2 daughters, 7-year-old and 9-year-old girls who loved nothing more than exploring nature with their parents. They were the kind of couple who still held hands after years of marriage, who made weekend hiking a family tradition, who believed that fresh air and family time could solve most of life's problems. And that Saturday morning started like hundreds of others. Devil's Den State Park seemed perfect, just the right mix of scenic beauty and manageable trails for their young daughters. And just to give you an idea for those who haven't been there, the park spans more than 2,500 acres of Ozark wilderness, filled with sandstone bluffs, mysterious caves, and creeks that cut through the valley. Families come for the rustic cabins built in the 1930s, the 8-acre lake for fishing and swimming, and over 20 miles of trails that range from easy strolls to steep climbs leading to breathtaking overlooks. For Clinton and Kristen Brink, it was the kind of place that felt safe, wholesome, and perfect for making memories with their little girls. Yet none of them could have imagined that beneath the shade of those ancient trees, a predator was waiting. But here's what makes this case so terrifying. Andrew James McGann wasn't some drifter or career criminal. He was a 28-year-old teacher who'd just been hired by the Springdale School District. In short, he had no criminal record, no history of violence, no connection whatsoever to the Brink family. So what transforms an educator into a killer? And why did he choose this family on this day? The attack itself reveals a level of calculated brutality that still haunts investigators. Clinton was struck first, a father's worst nightmare as he realized he couldn't protect his family from what was coming. But here's where the story takes an even darker turn. Kristen had managed to get their daughters to safety, moving them away from the initial violence. She could have kept running. She could have saved herself. Instead, she made the choice that would define her final moments. She went back for Clinton. That decision cost Kristen her life, but it also revealed something profound about who she was. Even facing unimaginable terror, her first instinct was to protect the man she loved. The girls, meanwhile, were found unharmed about half a mile into the park, traumatized witnesses to their parents' final act of heroism. At that time, several hikers had already heard the girls calling for help, which is why officers were able to respond right away.
Help! Sweep the main trail first right now.
Main trail? Ice blocks, hiking down. For help.
Repeat that. Say again. Repeat.
Hear yells calling for help. We're hiking down.
By the time officers arrived, all they could find were the bodies. There was no sign of the killer anywhere.
Try to relay to the office that we found the victims down here. They're on the lower Devil's Den Trail.
Just a couple minutes. I think I see you right there. I've got two bodies down here.
But the killer made a critical mistake during his attack. He injured himself in the struggle, leaving behind blood that would become his DNA signature at the crime scene. Within hours, Arkansas State Police had a biological roadmap leading directly to their killer, Andrew James McGann. The question wasn't who did this, it was why. The manhunt that followed gripped the entire region. Arkansas State Police released composite sketches and photos, turning every citizen into a potential detective. Tips poured in from across multiple states as the image of McGann's face spread through social media and news outlets. But even as law enforcement worked around the clock, one terrifying reality remained. A killer was loose, and no one understood his motivation. The arrest came just 4 days later in the most mundane setting imaginable. McGann was getting a haircut at a Springdale barbershop when law enforcement closed in. Picture the scene. A man who'd brutally murdered 2 parents just days earlier, sitting calmly in a barber's chair, acting like nothing had happened. The banality of evil in its purest form. But McGann's calm demeanor shattered the moment police confronted him. Not only did DNA evidence link him definitively to the crime scene, but during questioning, he confessed. He admitted to killing Clinton and Kristen Brink in cold blood. Yet even with a confession, the most crucial question remained unanswered. Why? The case has now stretched far beyond Arkansas. Law enforcement in several states is reviewing unsolved murders to see if Andrew James McGann could be connected. Investigators are looking closely at whether the deadly attack at Devil's Den was his first homicide or part of a disturbing pattern of violence. Authorities are also considering if Clinton and Kristen Brink were targeted by chance or if something about that day placed them directly in his path. And just to give you an idea of how wide this net has become, police in Vermont are now comparing notes with investigators in Arkansas. Back in October of 2023, 77-year-old Honoree Fleming, a respected former college dean, was shot and killed on the Delaware and Hudson Rail Trail in Castleton, Vermont. Witnesses described seeing a white man with short red hair, about 5 feet 10 inches tall, wearing a dark gray shirt and carrying a black backpack looking like this. That sketch bears striking similarities to what witnesses reported at Devil's Den, where McGann was also said to have been carrying a black backpack as he fled the scene. McGann's background only raises more questions. Since 2022, he lived in Arkansas, Texas, and Oklahoma, and he grew up in Illinois. Despite his young age, just 28, he had already worked in 5 different school districts in only 3 years, which is highly unusual for a teacher. Parents in Texas even raised concerns in 2022 about his behavior around young girls in class, claiming he played favorites, made inappropriate comments, and blurred professional boundaries. In fact, this was an interview with one of his students' mothers. In one district outside Dallas, parents complained about McGann's behavior toward young girls in his classroom. According to one mother, he allegedly made comments like, "I wish I could date you," and "I wish you could be my girlfriend." Others claimed he gave candy and soda only to selected girls and even held special lunches for those he favored. The school's internal investigation stopped short of finding solid proof of misconduct, but administrators suspended him over what they called poor judgment and favoritism. Despite these concerns, McGann moved on quickly to other schools, finding new jobs with clean background checks that revealed nothing alarming. This pattern of drifting from job to job while avoiding a criminal record meant McGann could keep getting hired. By the summer of 2025, he had landed a new position in Springdale, Arkansas. Aside from the Vermont case, officers are also looking into a much older one with similarities so striking that you can't help but stop and wonder if it's truly a coincidence. Nearly 5 years before the Brink family was attacked at Devil's Den State Park in Arkansas, another hiker lost his life under eerily familiar circumstances hundreds of miles away. On October 14, 2020, 24-year-old John Craig Schmutzer set out for a hike at Devil's Lake State Park in Wisconsin. It was a crisp fall day. the kind that draws thousands of visitors to the park to watch the leaves change color across the bluffs and valleys. Devil's Lake isn't just any park. It's the busiest state park in Wisconsin, sprawling across more than 9,000 acres, with high quartzite cliffs and deep wooded trails. That morning, families and tourists filled the area, yet somewhere along the Grottos Trail on the south side of the park, Schmutzer crossed paths with a predator. At exactly 11:38 in the morning, Schmutzer was attacked and stabbed to death. Broad daylight, on a trail swarming with hikers. Witnesses later reported seeing a man running frantically from the area. The description they gave was vague but memorable. A white male, about 6 feet tall, slender to medium build, wearing dark pants with ripped knees, a dark top, possibly a hoodie, and carrying himself in a way that looked erratic, stumbling as he ran. Despite multiple people spotting him, no clear photos were taken, and the case quickly grew cold. DNA samples were collected, but nothing tied to a suspect. Now, with Andrew James McGann behind bars in Arkansas, Sauk County investigators are exchanging notes with Arkansas State Police. They are carefully comparing the Schmutzer homicide to the Brink family murders. Both involve state parks named Devils. Both involve sudden, brutal attacks in broad daylight. Both involve knives. And both suggest a predator who struck without warning and then vanished. To make the picture even sharper, police in Wisconsin are reviewing DNA evidence from the 2020 case alongside evidence collected in Arkansas, blood at the Devil's Den crime scene, as well as materials recovered from McGann's home and car. Forensic testing is underway, though no direct match has been announced. For Schmutzer's family, this renewed attention brings a glimmer of hope that his killer might finally be identified. For investigators, it raises the possibility that McGann's trail of violence didn't begin in Arkansas or even Vermont, but years earlier in Wisconsin. Additionally, when you look at his background, some people say the signs were always there, even if no one recognized them at the time. One neighbor who grew up with him remembers it this way.
1 minute he's fine, and then if, you're kind of messing with him, he freaks out, completely freaks out. And, so much to the point where it's uncomfortable.
Those who knew him as a kid called him Andy. He grew up in Illinois, in a suburb southwest of Chicago. Back then, he played baseball, spent time with friends, and was coached by his father. On the surface, he seemed like a normal boy in a normal neighborhood, but as childhood friends now admit, looking back, there were moments of temper and intensity they didn't fully understand. As mentioned earlier, he had been hired by at least 5 different school districts in 3 different states, Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas, ever since 2022. That kind of turnover is highly unusual for someone in education, where most teachers stay in a role for years at a time. Piecing together his past hasn't been simple, even for police. When authorities first announced his arrest, they even got his name wrong, calling him James Andrew McGann before later correcting it. Records show he once listed Oklahoma State University as his college, but his actual history traced back further north to Illinois. That confusion only added to the sense that McGann had been slipping through the cracks for years, reinventing himself each time he crossed a state line. So imagine the shock of his former classmates and neighbors when they saw his mugshot plastered across national news. For people who once sat beside him in class or played baseball with him as kids, the realization was surreal. The boy they had known as Andy was now accused of murdering Clinton and Kristen Brink, and possibly linked to 2 other brutal attacks in different states. As of now, nothing has been confirmed, but investigators are piecing together a bigger puzzle, hoping that McGann could be the answer to attacks left unsolved for years. For grieving families in Vermont and Wisconsin, the possibility of finally learning the truth means justice may still come, even after years of silence. Meanwhile, McGann sits inside Washington County's detention center, charged with 2 counts of capital murder. Prosecutor Brandon Carter has announced his office will pursue the death penalty. That decision alone guarantees years of legal warfare, motions, hearings, appeals that could drag on for more than a decade. And while lawyers debate strategy in courtrooms, 2 little girls are learning how to live without their parents. At only 7 and 9 years old, they now stay with relatives, surrounded by love, but still far too young to understand why their mother and father aren't coming back. In court, McGann entered a plea of not guilty, directly contradicting what police sources say he admitted after his arrest. Behind closed doors, he reportedly confessed to killing Clinton and Kristen Brink, yet in front of cameras, reporters, and grieving family members, he denied everything. That contradiction sets up a trial that promises to be long, complex, and emotionally devastating, both for the Brink family and for a community still in shock. The Brink story has struck such a deep nerve because they did everything right. They chose a family-friendly state park. They stayed together as a group. They lived quietly in Prairie Grove, building a life around their daughter's safety and future. Clinton had just secured a steady job as a delivery driver, while Kristen devoted her days to raising the children. They had no enemies, no debts, no secrets, and yet none of it mattered when a predator crossed their path. The crime scene told investigators this was no random explosion of anger. McGann had picked his location carefully, an isolated trail where cell service disappeared, where screams would be muffled by thick forest, but where escape routes were close at hand. The placement of the bodies, the precision of the wounds, even the way his license plate was covered in black tape suggested methodical planning. This wasn't chaos. It was a hunt. Forensic evidence revealed just how hard Clinton and Kristen fought. Clinton inflicted wounds that left McGann's blood behind. Kristen rushed her daughters toward safety, then turned back to save her husband, sacrificing herself in the process. Their courage created the DNA trail that exposed McGann's identity and cracked open his carefully guarded facade. Within 48 hours, Arkansas State Police released a composite sketch and photo of the suspect. The image went viral, drawing in thousands of tips. Surveillance footage placed a suspicious car near the park multiple times, even weeks before the murders. Witnesses described a man leaving the scene with blood on his face, speeding away in a dark sedan. Bit by bit, investigators built their case. On July 30th, just 4 days later, the manhunt ended, not in a dramatic standoff, but in a barbershop chair. Officers surrounded the Springdale shop less than 5 minutes into McGann's haircut. Calm, almost detached, he offered no resistance. But once confronted with DNA, footage, and witness accounts, he confessed. Detectives described his words as chillingly matter-of-fact. No motive, no remorse, no emotion. That absence of explanation terrified investigators more than anything else. But the most troubling aspect of this case wasn't what it revealed about McGann. It was what it revealed about the limitations of our safety systems. McGann had no criminal record, no history of violence, no red flags that might have identified him as dangerous. He passed background checks for teaching positions. He appeared normal to neighbors and colleagues. If someone like McGann could hide his capacity for violence so completely, how many others might be walking among us? This question haunted law enforcement professionals working the case. Random violence is supposed to be rare, committed by people whose instability is obvious to trained observers. But McGann challenged that assumption. He demonstrated that predators could maintain facades of normalcy while planning attacks, that respectability could mask murderous intent, that evil could hide behind the most trusted professions. The ripple effects extended beyond criminal justice into education policy. How thoroughly do school districts investigate potential employees? What psychological screening might identify someone capable of violence? Could better systems have prevented McGann from gaining access to children, even if they couldn't have saved the Brinks? These systemic questions mattered because McGann represented a new category of threat, the invisible predator who kills without warning, without motive, without pattern. Traditional safety measures assume rational actors with understandable motivations. They're designed to catch criminals who rob banks for money or kill spouses for insurance. They're not equipped to identify someone who murders families for reasons he can't or won't explain. As McGann awaits trial, the date set for November 14, 2025, represents just the beginning of a legal process that could stretch for decades. Death penalty cases average 15 years from sentencing to execution, meaning the Brink daughters could be married with children of their own before this chapter of their lives finally closes. That timeline raises difficult questions about justice and healing. Is prolonged legal warfare the best way to honor Clinton and Kristen's memory? Does the death penalty provide closure or simply extend the trauma? These aren't questions with clear answers, but they're questions the Brink family will live with every day. The case has already changed Devil's Den State Park forever. Trails that once represented peace and family recreation now carry associations with violence and loss. Families who once hiked there without thought now question whether any public space is truly safe. McGann's actions didn't just destroy one family, they damaged an entire community's sense of security. But perhaps the most important lesson from this tragedy isn't about McGann's capacity for evil, it's about Clinton and Kristen's capacity for love. In their final moments, facing unimaginable terror, they chose to protect each other and their children. That choice, more than McGann's violence, should define how we remember this story. The questions about McGann's motives may never be answered. He may take his secrets to the grave, leaving investigators and the public to wonder forever what drove him to commit such senseless violence. But the questions about the Brinks' character have already been answered through their actions. They were heroes who died protecting what they loved most. As this case moves toward trial, we're left confronting uncomfortable truths about the world we live in. Evil doesn't always announce itself. Predators don't always fit our expectations. Safety is never guaranteed, no matter how carefully we choose our communities or plan our activities. But we're also reminded of something more powerful than fear: the capacity of ordinary people to show extraordinary courage when faced with evil. Clinton and Kristen Brink weren't trained fighters or security professionals. They were just parents who refused to let evil win without a fight. Their daughters will grow up without them, but they'll also grow up knowing their parents' final act was one of love and protection. That legacy, painful as it is, carries more meaning than anything McGann's violence could ever destroy. What do you think should happen to Andrew McGann? Does the death penalty provide justice for the Brink family? Or does life in prison better serve the cause of justice? Share your thoughts in the comments below. This case raises questions that deserve serious discussion. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the fragility of safety and the power of love, please hit that like button and subscribe. Every subscription helps us tell these stories with the dignity they deserve and ensures that victims like Clinton and Kristen Brink are remembered for their courage rather than forgotten in the shadow of their killer's evil. We owe it to them and to their daughters to keep their memory alive.